Hello, this is DIY Reptiles, and today I am going to be talking about detritus worms. So before I do that, I would like to give a little bit of background on this tank and what got me to this point. So I have a 10-gallon tank that I want to keep my pet betta in, and I've had the betta for a long time in my 125-gallon aquarium, and I need to downsize it quite a lot because I need to put the turtles in there once winter comes, and it's been being kept communally for a very long time with a lot of other community fish, not other bettas, but just, you know, it and then a bunch of like minnows and koi catfish, and it's been doing perfectly fine in such a large tank, and I've had no problems with it. So now I'm moving it into a 10-gallon. I wanted to do a sand setup. As you can see, I'm kind of sucking at it right now, but I've never used sand in an aquarium before, and I really can't on a large scale because I keep turtles. So a long time ago when I was on vacation, I got beach sand. So I did a little bit of research, and I found out that snails are fine with sand, bettas are fine with sand, beach sand's dangerous because it probably has chemicals in it and stuff. So I super washed this thoroughly. And this is actually beach sand, which some sources will say you can't use, some will say you can use if you wash it thoroughly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it in this bucket of water, so then any type of bad things that it might leach out in an aquarium, it'll leach out into this water, and then later, either tonight or probably tomorrow, I will dump this water out and then rinse it again and then fill it again and let it sit for another day or so. And then I will actually use it in my aquarium after I rinse it again after that. So I just don't want to, introduce anything to my aquarium. It's not like I got this from the water. I actually got it really far from the water, but it was still the beach. And I have had it sitting for a really, really long time. So I'm not worried about introducing any type of living things, I guess. But any salt or chemicals or anything that would be part of the sand. I mean, it was on a pretty well-traveled beach, so I just don't want to introduce anything harmful into the aquarium. So I will rinse it a couple times. I don't know if this is completely adequate. I don't know if it's overkill. Not entirely sure, but I really don't have any doubt in my mind that this will not really cause a problem, besides the fact that it's sand and I've never used it before and I don't know how well that'll go. But I mean, it seems pretty good so far, so that's a good sign. The water's completely clear and I was just splashing all this stuff around, so I think that's pretty good considering I'm going to be putting it in an aquarium. So I think that's cool, and I'm gonna let. And I washed it every single day, multiple times, and then I eventually added it into my aquarium. Then I added in the sponge filter, and I added in a piece of wood that I've had waterlogging in the 300-gallon stock tank outside with my turtles, and that was it. Then I went to add in the pot that you see here with that's dirted, so there's soil within there, and then I have Italian Vallisneria growing out of it, and the money plant, I think that's what it's called, growing out of it as well. And I tried to add that in, and I moved around the sand, and a bunch of worms came out, and that was not good in my eyes. So I'll tell you what happened exactly from there. Okay, so I was about to drain this tank. What I was gonna do is I'm gonna dry out the substrate, dry out the piece of wood, and dry out the filter, and just kind of restart this tank because of the worms. Because, I mean, I saw worms in my aquarium and I was just this has to be a bad thing. I don't even care what they are. I just don't want them in my aquarium any longer. And that was kind of my reaction. But just to be sure, I went ahead and did some research, and let's see if I can get the worms up again. All I did last time was I just messed up in the substrate, and then a bunch of little worms appeared in my tank, and I'm going to see if that happens again. Okay, so there you can see it, like right there. It's a little snake-like worm, I guess I would describe it, and they're kind of wiggling all around everywhere. Now, after a little bit of research, I believe these are detritus worms. Now, there's two main types of worms that you can find in your aquarium. There's planaria, and then there's detritus worms. And just in case you're wondering, I had no idea about any of this until I just looked it up. And planaria will stick to the glass and kind of move around. They seem a little bit thicker than these are, and those are flat worms. They're more of like a ancient type of worm, and they kind of have like almost a diamond shaped head. And then I believe these are detritus worms, and that's why we don't see them until we mess up the substrate. And they're kind of like a snake-like appearance when they're moving around in the water, but then when they move on the glass, they kind of have an earthworm type appearance because these are round worms, and you can see the guppies want to eat them. That's pretty funny. I'm not surprised. So these are like kind of related to earthworms, and they're called detritus worms. Why you would ever see detritus worms in your aquarium is if you're not really taking care of your aquarium properly, and you end up with a huge bloom of them, and then there's not enough oxygen in your aquarium because maybe you didn't do enough water changes, or it's overpopulated, or you fed it too much. And then these guys breed a ton, there's a ton of them, and then they come to the surface, and then you see them because you wouldn't normally see them because they've been down in the substrate, but since the tank's kind of dirty, not enough oxygen, they come up to the surface to get oxygen. Now, I just set up this tank. So why are there a bunch of worms in here? I actually do know why. It's because this big piece of wood I put in here for sure brought them in. There's nothing else. I mean, I don't think they're in here. I mean, there's detritus all over the bottom, but I've never seen worms in here, and there's not a substrate or anything like that. I mean, they don't need a substrate, but I would think they'd like something to kind of cling to. So it has to be that piece of wood, and there isn't, like I said, they probably want a substrate to move around. So you might even have detritus worms in your aquarium. You just wouldn't really see them because they hide in the substrate, and as long as your aquarium's good, then you shouldn't have an issue with them. Now, in the 300 gallon, it's like for sure overpopulated. I'm pretty sure I overfeed it, and I should probably do more water changes on it. So I'm not surprised that there's a lot of them in there. Now, they don't exactly have something to cling to like substrate, so I'm not surprised that there's a bunch on the driftwood. So what I'm gonna do is, I don't think I'm gonna do anything. I don't think this is an issue. From what I've read, these are what they are, and they are completely harmless. So what they only feed on decaying matter, so they're basically like the isopods and the springtails and the earthworms in our terrariums here. So like in the iguana's cage or in the gecko's cage and stuff like that. They're basically the cleanup crew, and as long as this tank, like I don't, overfeed it and mess with it too much, like I just keep it well, in theory I won't ever see them, especially since when you have sand in an aquarium, you don't like do what you do in you gravel vacuum, which is you move around the gravel. With sand, you just take off what's on top, which, as you can see, I kind of moved in what's on top, which isn't great, but I think I'm just going to leave it. Now, they're completely harmless to fish. The planaria, the different type of common worm you'd see in your aquarium, are not safe for fish. They can actually harm the gills of fish, and they can eat the eggs of fish, but they don't like directly attack them. These worms can even be used as a good food item, so maybe once I have the betta in here, every once in a while I'll actually move around the substrate to get the betta to eat them. So as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, I don't think I necessarily need to do anything. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to take out this piece of wood and I am going to spray it off a bunch because I don't know if there's anything else on it, but it makes total sense that these would be in my 300-gallon stock tank and like all of that. So yeah, I don't think I need to do anything about it. I don't love that. Like, they're really not, they're kind of stressing me out just looking at them. I can just, I mean, just see it. Like, that just doesn't look right, you know? It kind of freaks me out. But, I mean, from what I've read, it should be all right. And that makes enough sense to me. So I'm going to leave them in, mostly because it's a lot of work to take this tank out, like completely sterilize everything in here. It's going to take forever. And there should be no problem with just leaving it how it is. So I think I'm going to go ahead and add plants back in here because I just put this planter in there, and I think I'm going to put it back in because I think everything will be all right with that. And I want to look, I have a peanut butter jar here, and this is like uber dirty water. You can't see through it at all. It's probably a combination of like black, brown, and green or something like that. It is water from a tank I just took down outside. So the water's super dirty, like uber dirty, because I literally took the filter and like wringed it out into that water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of let this sit in the dark, and that'll kill off the algae, and then also just let everything kind of sink to the bottom, hopefully. I don't know how long that's going to take, but what that will tell me is if there's worms in here. So if there's worms, then I'm like, okay, it for sure came outside. I mean, it didn't come from the substrate. I know that for a fact. And I don't think it would have come from the guppy tank because I moved over the sponge filter from the guppy tank. So it could have come from the guppy tank, but I don't think it did. And it's a little tiny turtle here. So that is the plan. Shouldn't be a problem. And those are Detritus worms, so it's kind of fun. The thing that is kind of good about them, I guess, is that your fish can eat them. So I've been looking for new live food, and I've been trying to feed my fish mosquito larvae whenever I can, because I have a lot of outside tubs and stuff that end up getting mosquito larvae in them, so I'll feed those to my fish, and the fish really enjoy them. But just from the looks of the guppies going after the detritus worms in this tank, I think they'll probably be a good thing. And I'd imagine that the betta would like that. I saw it earlier. Sometimes it hides, sometimes it's out, and looks like the betta's hiding right now, I think. So I think it'll enjoy it. Now this tank probably has detritus worms as well, because all of the filtration from that came from the 300 gallons, so it makes sense that it would also have it. So all of that makes perfect sense, but plot twist, they came from this tank right here. So literally it made perfect sense that they came from the piece of wood. Like that, just everything made sense there. But no, because I was doing a water change on this tank the other day, and there was a bunch of worms everywhere, so they're living down in all the detritus, which makes sense because they're detritus worms. So yeah, they came from that tank, which makes sense why there's so many, is because they came from the filter. The filter came from there, and I'm sure they're living all up in the filter. So I'd imagine they're probably like in every tank that I have, probably, and I'm fine with that. It doesn't matter. So they're unsightly, but other than that, completely fine. Don't worry about it. If you have detritus worms, not something to worry about. I should probably do more water changes on my tanks though. Also, this tank has been set up for quite a while, and it's kind of like stagnant a little bit. I mean, it has a sponge filter, but I don't think a whole lot's going on with it, mostly because I have this crazy plant that's growing everywhere. This is a sweet potato that kind of went bad, and I was like, we're not gonna eat this, let's throw it in the fish tank. So I got it to grow in this jar, and then I was like, I gotta put it in the fish tank. So I put it, and it's resting on this piece of wood, and then as you can see, the roots are absolutely like taking over this entire tank, and then there's all these vines that are really kind of sad looking. I don't know, they all look like all the leaves are super droopy, which doesn't make any sense at all to me, because shouldn't they be like super not droopy, because it's literally growing out of water? But this is the craziest thing ever. So I've never grown sweet potato before. I think I've tried to grow it in an aquarium before, but basically what's going to happen is it's going to grow and grow and grow, and then eventually the potato will rot, and then I'll have to take it out and it'll all grow bad. But for now, it's going to take a ton of nitrite and ammonia from the water and stuff and turn it into nitrate, which is fine. So that's good for now, and then I'll add in other plants once this thing dies off. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lovely educational video about detritus worms, even though they're, like I said, unsightly. They kind of freak me out. But anyway, have a fantastic day. Like the video if you liked the video, and comment down below what you think of detritus worms, and if you have detritus worms, or if you've ever known about detritus worms, and also what you think of this really sad looking sand bottom tank and this apple snail, which is awesome. I love the snails so much. And just comment anything, and have a great day, and subscribe if you want.